Can you remember what you were obsessed with when you were 14? For me, it was actually basketball. I was on my way to our weekly Friday night kind of training, and there's this like rave tune on the radio, but then it suddenly flipped into this reggae thing, and it completely blew my mind. I couldn't believe that something could go from one extreme to a complete other. So years later, I discovered something even more fascinating, that it's not just the reggae sample. Almost every single sound in this track is a sample from another record. So it makes me wonder how they did that. How did they take all these parts and create something completely new? What original tracks did they sample? How did they exactly transform those sounds into something entirely their own? Let's jump in. So we start off with these iconic chords. This chord sequence is basically F major, D major, E major, D minor, and then another E major. So it seems to me that Liam Howlett based this whole chord progression around this kind of single note rise, which goes like this. Rather than the kind of boring F major scale, we've got this really interesting scale. Let me know if you know what it is. And then from that's why when we go from the F, in F major it would be going to D minor, which would sound like this. But instead we go to D major, which sounds like this. And then we go to E major, which is again weird. I think in F we would have E diminished or something. But altogether it sounds like this with a bit of extra accompaniment with these notes. And then of course here it goes to the minor. So it's like, even within the chord progression, we're moving in and out of a key. So I don't want to get too bogged down in the music theory, because it's really not my strongest suit. But what I want to say is, this comes from his mind. It comes from Liam Howlett's mind. It doesn't come from like a plugin that chooses chords for you or a music theory book, because it's kind of breaking a lot of the rules of music theory, you could say. On another level, that's not how music theory operates. But what I take away from this personally is that it's really good just to experiment and play, and to do that you kind of need a keyboard, you kind of need to be playing with notes and just listening, rather than trying to fit yourself into some box of what's right, because in a sense there is no wrong or right. If it sounds good, it is good. So although I said that nearly all of this track was samples, I think this is one of the only exceptions, is these strings, which I believe came from a Roland D220 sound module. And I've used the Roland Cloud JV1080 Bright String preset. I've done a bit of Decimort just to try and get the crusty sampler vibe a little bit, probably quite subtle. Then we've just got a bit of chorus on it. Gives it a bit of movement. And then a little bit of EQ. Because the original, it doesn't have that much brightness. So if you'd like to jumpstart your music production by recreating a classic track, Belfast by Orbital, I've got a free project and some tutorials to get you going with it. Just click the link in the description for that. But then, from here on in, we're basically in the realm of all samples. So where does this amazing hook, where does this come from? So let's just quickly look at the samples. So some of you will know this. For those who don't, this actually comes from an old Prodigy track called Omen, and this is what it sounds like. So he's just taken this tiny ding and turned it into... The sound itself, all I've done is drag that into a sampler, and we've got a little loop here to make it last longer. Other thing I've done is put a little bit of decay on the amp envelope just to give it a bit of like snap. So without that, kind of a bit washy. Oh no, this is sustain actually. If that's on full, the strike isn't that pronounced, but if we reduce the sustain and we've got a nice, quite fairly short decay, that will gives us that like percussive feeling. And then let's just look at the melody. So it's very cool. So we're just going from A to A sharp, and then from, let's say, C sharp to D. So it's quite a like Middle Eastern kind of scale. Again, I'm sure he just would have been playing around with this, not like following a music theory book. But it's a really cool hook, and what you notice about really cool hooks is there's quite a lot of repetition in them, but you don't want them to be too repetitive. But you just want to get the, well, he's a bit of a genius, so he's got a really nice balance here. How does the track progress from here? Let's have a look at the drums. We've essentially got one main drum loop, which is from Two Bad Mice Bomb Scare, and it's from this part of the tune. So just play a little bit of that tune. And Liam's just looped a little bit of that, and I think this bit as well, because you can kind of hear extra kick drums in that one, which isn't in this. So what I've done is I've used both of those, put them in a sampler, and we're just re-triggering it like that. So if we didn't re-trigger, this is a great technique to use, often used in jungle. And then I've got my other loop, which is doing the same thing. And then we have another loop from the Shaman Hyperreal. And that is being re-triggered once. So we're just about to get to the amazing reggae tune drop. But before we do that, let's just look at a few of these other sounds going on that are part of this, an important part of this tune. So the first one we can look at is this scratch. So this is from Peter Piper by Run DMC. Classic tune. Liam has done a great job in chopping this up into little parts. And then we have a bit of Cool Keith. I think Liam's a massive fan. He features in a number of their tunes. I'll take your brain to another dimension. So let's just have a little listen to the original of that from Critical Beatdown by Ultramagnetic MCs. Pay close attention. I'll take your brain to another dimension. What sticks out to me is that when I used to produce, I kind of thought to get a sample, you had to have it clean, like you couldn't have it with drums. But that's really not the case, and we can see that here is, I mean, he might have had an a cappella, but it sounds fine. I'll take your brain to another dimension. You know, it blends in with everything else. I'll take your brain to another dimension. So it's just pitched up. I'll take your brain to another dimension. Then we have this honk sound, which you don't maybe notice, but once you hear it, you'll hear it. I think this is correct. So this is actually from the reggae track Max Romeo Chase the Devil. Without it, it'd be quite empty. We're going to hear this in just a moment, but it's another really kind of important part of the track is this. So this is from Hanna-Barbera cartoon sound effects. So it's kind of a really silly sound, and it kind of shouldn't work, but I feel like it totally does. There's something about the reggae track, it kind of almost seems part of it. And this is another really nice bit. So it's really easy when you're working in modern DAWs to just have everything like happening after 16. So you have 16 bars, then this bit, then 16 bars, then 16 bars. But it's really nice sometimes to like extend things for an extra bar or mess with it basically. And that's what Liam's doing here. He just teases it out a bit longer with an extra bar of the strings and leaves you hanging there. Like it builds even more tension and suspense. I'm gonna send him to outer space. So I just love the contrast of this. So this is, you may well know, Max Romeo Chase the Devil. So what we've got here is basically two chops of it. So if we listen to the original. Out of Earth, I'm gonna send him to outer space to find another race. I'm gonna send him to outer space. So we've got this in a sampler. I'm gonna send him to outer space to find. So you can hear that this is the honk bit and it's reversing. I'm gonna send him to outer space to find another race. Another really important part of this is that it doesn't start on the one. So really the one of this is send him, like in this tune. I'm gonna send him to outer space to find another race. I'm gonna send him to outer space to find another race. I'm gonna send him. It's just such an amazing contrast, the style of it and the vocal, and it just makes the tune, doesn't it? So from there, the only other sounds to kind of reveal are like these rave stabs. So firstly we have this. I would have thought this is from a synth or something, maybe an Alpha Juno with a chord functionality, but actually it's from this tune. Absolute classic. You wouldn't know it necessarily that it was sampled in this tune because he's just taking one chord chop and making something completely new. Like this is the essence of sampling really. So we're just taking this little chop and it's just really hooky, and then we have a slightly different pattern for the strings which just follows it along. So yeah, we can probably work out from this the notes. So A, E, F, G. I'm gonna send him to outer space to find another race. I'm gonna send him to outer space to find another race. I'm gonna send him to outer space to find another race. I'm gonna send him to outer space to find another race. I'll take a brain to another dimension. I'll take a brain to another dimension. I'll take a brain to another dimension. Pay close attention. And then we have another rave stab, which again is a sample, Shades of Rhythm, Homicide, and the original sounds like this. Again, absolute classic hardcore track. I'm not that up on all that stuff. It's probably a classic, right? Tell me. But again, he's just taken a tiny chop and made something completely his own. Another thing you'll notice about like the use of sampling in kind of the olden days, it wasn't so much about mangling the sound into something you hadn't heard. It's just about taking a small part and then playing it. And that's basically the main thing samplers did when they first came out, was the fact that you could put something and then pitch it up and down the keyboard. So it's really good to remember that, because you know, it's easy to get overwhelmed with 1,000 different ways of mangling the sound and thinking we have to be super clever, when these works of genius show that that's maybe not the best way to go about things. And really interesting notes. Very cool. And then he's just moving it up. Is it like a semitone? So a lot of movements just moving a semitone, which creates this amazing vibe. It's quite an achievement to take so many different sounding things and make something that sounds so cohesive. So if you want to see how more classic tracks from the 90s were made, have a look at this playlist here.